Through the first 4 weeks of the season, Syracuse football looked destined for another bowl-eligible campaign, undefeated in their non-conference schedule, heading into ACC play with swagger. But when injuries piled on both offense and defense, the Orange crumbled with an at-home loss to Clemson and a beatdown in Chapel Hill last Saturday. But now, the Orange face their biggest test of the season, a chance to upset the number 4 team in the country down in Tallahassee, something SU hasn't done since 2018. It's Florida State, and it's Syracuse, and we got it all on Cuse Countdown, and it starts right now. Welcome inside the CitrusTV studios for another episode of Cuse Countdown. Chloe Smarz, Srikar, Rajendran, Sklar here to preview Syracuse's biggest test of the season on the road against a team that many have to make the college football playoffs, the Florida State Seminoles. It's two teams going in two completely different directions. Florida State undefeated atop the ACC, while the Orange, guys, want to put it nicely, it's been a disastrous start to conference play. Less than a week ago, the Cuse faced their first road test in the ACC with a challenge in Chapel Hill, led by their Heisman candidate quarterback Drake May, who simply bullied SU with nearly 500 yards of total offense en route to a 40-7 win over the Orange. Syracuse fans having to close their eyes for much of the game, Stephen. Very little positive to take away if you're SU.
Well, yeah, you look at what Drake May did, and you kind of start to understand where all this hype comes from. I mean, so many yards, so much offense coming out of that man's arms, and simply put, it was JV versus varsity. Syracuse never had a chance in this game, not from the jump, not at halftime, not anywhere close, anywhere in between minute number 1 and minute number 60. So it got ugly fast, but that's the nature of this game. Syracuse, not a very good team. UNC, led by a great quarterback, a pretty good team.
100%. And I think SU just came out flat. Like, they tried to set a tone, and they failed. They tried to run one game plan for the entire game, and guess what? They failed. It's a big problem. The play calling on offense, super vanilla. You run a dink and dunk offense for the whole game. It's not going to work. You have to make adjustments. The adjustments were not made, and SU had to suffer because of it.
Well, SU wasn't suffering in the beginning of the season. Through the first month of the season, 4 wins. That included Syracuse's first Big Ten road victory in over a decade against Purdue. But then you got to the gauntlet of SU's schedule. Tough ACC opponents to start. You had Clemson, you had UNC, and now you have Florida State. Srikar. The Orange really struggling against better competition.
Yeah, and I think it's a night and day difference from the first 4 games of this season and then to now. The team just looks so much more prepared. But then when you go up against tougher competition, no one was able to rise to the occasion. That is a huge problem. It was a problem last season, and it's showing up now once again for the Orange. It is just a constant fatal flaw, and it is going to doom them for the rest of the season.
Yeah, the Orange have had this gauntlet that we've been talking about, the Clemson, UNC, Florida State stretch, circled on their schedule for a very long time. But honestly, people thought that this was going to start with the Purdue game, and Syracuse looked great. So through those first 3 weeks, I mean, they're a top 5 scoring offense, a top 4 scoring defense, and then like you mentioned, Chloe, everything sort of fell off after that. You go to the scoring offense, 40th in the country. Scoring defense, 30th in the country. Now, these are no slouch numbers by any stretch of the imagination, but they're not good enough to beat the opponents that they have in front of them. And that's the problem Syracuse has run into. They're not on the level of their opponents yet.
Well, for Syracuse, it's inconsistency. It's on and off the field, and it's been falling back on their head coach, Dino Babers, the head man, quick to blame external reasons for Syracuse's poor play. But, Stephen, should Babers be held accountable for the up and downs of the seasons in his tenure?
Yeah, unfortunately, he has to, because everything starts at the top. It starts with the athletic director, who has problems of his own, but it also goes down to the head coach, and Dino Babers is at fault for a lot of things. He's a terrible in-game manager. Syracuse ranks last in the ACC in time of possession so far. But honestly, ever since that 10-win season in 2018, it's never seemed like Syracuse has improved on it. So really, we have to start talking about whether or not this is it for Dino Babers and whether or not his job is at stake. Because right now, he's not doing enough to get Syracuse into a position to improve.
Steven, I wanted to harp on that one point you made about being an in-game manager. I think it's his worst flaw as a head coach. You make poor decisions in the past 2 games. Let's start with that Clemson game. You choose to trot out Brady Denneberg for a 57-yard field goal. His career long is 46. Like, how are you going to expect that to work? And even in this UNC game, you punt the ball down 30-7. Go for it. Give your offense life. He's aggressive at the wrong time, and he's conservative at the wrong time, and that's ultimately what's put him on the hot seat.
Well, staying with Dino, I mean, an issue for SU in the first half of the season, it's been the lack of depth, and you can say it's plagued by the injury bug. It's been biting Syracuse, both offense and defensively, especially with the loss of Arondé Gatson. And Coach Babers, well, he had some interesting words when asked about the status of his roster. Take a listen.
Brent, it's the same old thing. Depth is gone. You know, our depth is in the transfer portal. You know how many guys we lost. You know what schools they play at. There's schools like us, we're not going to have a lot of depth because it gets bought away. So.
It's an interesting spin on the question from Dino. It always is when you listen to his pressers. But regardless of what you want to say about the transfer portal, NIL, the landscape of college football, there's still no true stars on this team. They're just trying to find their identity, hoping that someone can step up. But so far, Srikar, it's been a struggle for the Orange, and you got to look at the lack of depth.
You can't play catch up with the rest of the ACC and the college football landscape as a whole if you refuse to play the game. You need to show some urgency, and that's where NIL and recruiting comes into play. And we see it on the field as well. You look at that receiver room against UNC. I mean, Garrett Schrader just looks like he can't trust anyone out there because no one has stepped up as the guy. That's the problem. When you don't have depth, you're going to suffer through injuries, and here it's showing up as a major problem.
I'm glad you're saying the quiet part out loud, because what's this, you know, we're Syracuse so we can't compete with these other schools nonsense? It doesn't make any sense to me. Is that the kind of message that you want to preach to your fans, to this community, to this city? You have the ability to go out and do it. You have the resources to be one of those teams that can invest in name, image, and likeness, but you just haven't. So you can't go around crying, poor me, saying we're not well equipped enough to do it. You just have to put the resources into the football program and give the fans what they deserve. And that's a competitive football team that can compete for an ACC championship year in and year out.
And many former players even saying that this school has the resources to do that, but they haven't to this point. But going to the trenches, it's been an inconsistent few games for both the offense and the defensive line. The Tar Heels exploded on the ground game last Saturday, rushing for over 200 yards against the SU unit. And Garrett Schrader, well, guys, he was under pressure all day long. Steven, it's an area that Syracuse needs to clean up if they want to get back in the win column.
Yeah, absolutely, because like you said, Garrett Schrader under a lot of pressure the entire game, and it's not really showing up in the box score when you go back and look at it, but Garrett Schrader was running for his life out there. He had 36 rushing yards, and most of those came on scrambles and broken plays. And when you have all this kinds of pressure on the quarterback, especially a quarterback like Garrett Schrader, who likes to run the football, it stops him from being able to do the things that he's best at. And that is extending plays, getting outside of the pocket, and making the magic happen right there.
You know, the trench battle is always interesting because I like to think that the game is always won in the trenches and along the lines, and SU was manhandled in both areas. If we start with the O-line, I mean, as you guys both said it, Schrader was running for his life. That pocket was breaking down a lot, so it obviously makes things tough on your QB. But on the defensive side, there was just no pushback on Drake May. He was just chilling in the pocket. He had all day, and he was able to look downfield and find his receivers because of it. UNC had 7 drives of 70-plus yards. Why do you think that is? Because the D-line didn't do anything. That is the issue, and if you can't win the trench battle, you're going to lose the game.
Well, we're going to look forward when we come back here on Cuse Countdown because we meet the Seminoles of Florida State. Srikar and Steven break down why FSU is dominating in their 2023 campaign. Stick with us.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back to Cuse Countdown. That's Steven Sklar, that's Srikar, Rajendran. I'm Chloe Smarz, getting you ready for Cuse and FSU down in the Sunshine State. It's time to meet the visitors. The Seminoles coming off an at-home win to Virginia Tech that prompted them to number 4 in the AP poll, the highest for FSU since the 2017 season. The Seminoles historically dominating the Orange, 12-2 all-time against SU. Florida State beat Syracuse in the Dome last year's home finale. The Orange only put up 3 points in the loss. Last time the SU took down the Seminoles, 2018 in the Eric Dungy Day. Srikar, it's been all Florida State when these two teams match up.
Yeah, the only thing I can really say is that FSU has always had SU's number, plain and simple. And last year's matchup was utter domination. You mentioned it. A huge win for FSU in that Dome finale. And it was also coming off a rough ACC loss to Pitt. SU lost to Pitt. Could history repeat itself here? You're coming off a UNC loss going into FSU? Maybe, but overall, it's just always been a rough go for the Orange against this Seminole squad.
Yeah, and while you look at that 12-2 number, that doesn't even tell you just how bad Syracuse has been when they go down to Doak Campbell, where they're 0-6. And obviously, going to a stadium like that plays into that record a little bit because there is no stadium in the ACC that's like Doak Campbell. 80,000 fans doing the war chant, raining down on you all game. The Southern atmosphere is just different, and it's going to be a different environment down south this weekend than Syracuse is used to playing in.
And it's been a different environment for FSU now in their 4th year under head coach Mike Norvell. Really changed his program last year, jumping to double-digit wins for the first time in his tenure. Norvell came from Memphis, where he led the Tigers to a 12-win season and a Cotton Bowl appearance in 2019. Steven, this man's bringing over a new mentality for the new era of the Seminoles.
Oh, yes, he is, and he's turned this program around greatly. You know, I think Dino Babers could actually take a book out of Mike Norvell's book a little bit because Norvell retained almost 90% of his production from a 10-3 team last year. In Syracuse land, that's unheard of, but down south where they have the brand and the culture of a perennial college football powerhouse, they're able to do things like that, bringing back 87% of your production. That was ranked number 1 in the country this season.
He's completely changed the aura and the culture around this program. It took some time, but FSU has improved on their record every year since 2020. I mean, he's also great at leading that locker room. Players are buying into what Norvell is bringing. Why do you think a guy like Jared Verse wanted to go to FSU as such a highly coveted guy in the transfer portal? It's because of Mike Norvell. So players have bought into his leadership, and he is a big part of the success of FSU.
Well, another big part of the Seminole season is thanks to number 13 at quarterback, Jordan Travis. It's been a long time coming for the senior. He transferred from Louisville back in 2019, but now his name is on the Heisman list, and he leads an offense that is top 10 in scoring and number 1 in the nation in red zone offense. Srikar, what makes Travis so good?
Man, he is a special, special player. And here's the thing. Florida State's got him a guy because he can spread the ball around to this skill position group. You look at guys like Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. They find success because Jordan Travis is able to feed them the ball in open space, right? So he is a big part of what makes this FSU offense go.
Yeah, everybody was all over Jordan Travis at the beginning of the season. He was 3rd in the odds for the Heisman race. And so far, I think it's been a little bit of a disappointment for him. Just, 7th in the ACC in yards, 6th in completion percentage. So not really what you're looking for out of him, but you touched on it. He's got so many weapons and a great run game with Trey Benson back there to help him out when he's going through this little bit of a downstretch. And, as maybe mild as this season has gone, he's still got FSU on the right track, and they're looking destined for a college football playoff appearance because of the man under center.
I mean, both of our analysts mentioned it. The key for Travis' success, the production of the Seminoles wide receivers. The unit emerging as one of the most dynamic group of pass catchers in the nation, as Steven breaks down the duo that has Florida State flying high on offense.
Well, Chloe, Syracuse has a matchup this weekend against arguably the best wide receiver unit in the entire country. It's not every day that the Orange get to face a true wide receiver one. Well, this weekend, they'll go up against 2 of them. Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman are threats wherever you put them on the field, and we'll start with Johnny Wilson. The 6'6", 240-pounder is an absolute menace. But he's not just physically imposing. He's not just a big, lanky guy in the middle of the field. He's got a lot of other tools in his bag also. And if we look back at some of the tape against Louisville last year, you'll see exactly what I mean. On this play, it's a second down play, and it goes over the middle of the field right to Johnny Wilson, who's got 2 to 3 steps on the nearest guy. So you get the twitch, the burst, the speed, the acceleration, all of it. And then on the next play, he finally finishes the drive. Gets into the end zone for the touchdown there, shows off the frame, and to be honest with you, I'm not really sure what the Cardinals were doing there because you cannot line that guy up one-on-one on an island if you want to keep the Seminoles off the board. And the same can be said about his teammate Keon Coleman because he is a jump ball artiste as far as everybody in the Tallahassee community is concerned. If we look at a game earlier in the year against Clemson, you'll see what I mean. This is an overtime. Game is tied. Game on the line, jump ball, up to Coleman, comes down with it in the end zone. Game's over from there. But what he does is make 50-50 balls look like 80-20 balls. That's how ridiculous this wide receiver unit is, and that's what the Seminoles are going to do to SU on the defensive side of the ball. Now, if we look on the other side of the coin, on the offensive side of the ball, you know Syracuse is going to have their hands full there too. Srikar, you want to tell us a little bit more?
Well, I'll tell you, Jared Verse is a name that has been skyrocketing up every NFL draft board, and it's for good reason. Now, you might be wondering why Albany versus Syracuse is on this TV. Well, that guy right there is the man of the hour. The Orange have seen Verse before, but just in a different uniform. This is why FSU and so many other schools, including Syracuse, coveted Jared Verse in the transfer portal. Just watch how he uses his power to get past the tackle here. First off, a great burst off the line. The anticipation was there. But one arm, he's pushing the tackle back, and the other, he's wrapping up the quarterback. That is unbelievable. A straight-up bull rush, all power and anticipation on that play. He senses the snap really well and uses his power the rest of the way. Again, how many defensive linemen in the country can sack a quarterback with one arm? Those are the types of plays that Verse can make. In his first year under Mike Norvell a season ago, Verse had 7.5 sacks. He has 2 this season, but I expect that number to go up after this game. SU's O-line has to shore up, and shore up well for this game, because even though Jared Verse may be in a different jersey, Chloe, I'm expecting the same impact off the D-line.
Srikar, Verse is going to be a problem come this Saturday. But when we come back here on Cuse Countdown, we're taking it to the alley. The bowling alley, that is. Srikar and Steven put on their bowling shoes and give their keys for SU's chance to score another bowl game. You won't want to miss it.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
We're back here on Cuse Countdown, and it's time to have a little fun in the bowling alley, guys. Every team in college football hopes that their season ends to a bowl game. Syracuse is heading towards the gutter right now. I think they can use a little bit of a bumper, you see where I'm going with this, right? To steer this team back on track and back in the win column. So how this game is going to work, I'll give you guys a player or position group, and you tell me what they need to do in order to get a strike in hopes of Syracuse landing that bowl game. You ready? Let me see your best bowling stance.
Just like that?
Flick? Yeah.
I mean, it's easy.
Yeah, you look good.
Yeah, I'm actually a lefty, so I do it the other way, but you get the point.
Well, first up, we got to go with QB1 himself. Mr. Garrett Schrader started off hot this season, but now some obvious pins in his way that's ultimately been slowing down this SU offense. Steven, what is the key for Schrader to get back on track and help this team overall?
Yeah, I think that the biggest key for him is just to eliminate the turnovers and eliminate the mistakes, because in 5 out of the first 6 games, he's thrown an interception, and that doesn't even count the countless number of fumbles that he's had, a couple last week against UNC. So it's been a real struggle for him to hold on to the ball. It's important in football. It's important in bowling, too. You don't want to let go of the ball if you don't know where it's going. So I think you see the analogy here, but just make sure you've got a clear lane, a clear alley, and get it down there as fast as you can and as accurately as you can without making too many mistakes.
Guys, I like where we're at. I like our mental game with the puns. So I'll spare the dramatics here.
I like that.
And I will go ahead and say that Garrett Schrader just needs to trust his receivers. In that UNC game, I mean, he was really hesitant to throw to his guys. He has chemistry with some of them. Damian Alford, obviously a lot of experience. Trust him, and the chemistry won't improve in one game, but progress, I think, is necessary for SU to find more production.
Well, now we're going to move to the ground game. It's pretty much been a one-man show at number 1, LaQuint Allen, the sophomore totaling 7 touchdowns this season. No real help besides quarterback Garrett Schrader. Srikar, are you content with the running back group, the situation going on, or do you think they need to do more to nail the strike?
I think they need to do a little more, but you're going up against a really, really tough D-line group with FSU. So I think the key here is out-physical them. Not with speed, because if you try and bounce it outside, FSU is going to match with their speedy corners and their linebackers. Here, they have to be more physical, try and get to the second level and create a chunk play.
So in other words, you don't want to just bowl it straight as fast as you can. You want a little bit of finesse.
We're really riding this bowling stuff.
Well, yeah, we gotta lead into it, right? So you just want a little bit more finesse on the ball if you're the running backs. I think it's important for them to set the tone in this game, because if you look all over this Syracuse offense, the one thing that's really working for them is this ground game. They average nearly 175 yards per game on the ground. That's pretty good. I mean, it's not top 5 in the ACC yet, but it's still pretty good when you look at this offense from a macro perspective. So just give the ball to LaQuint Allen, let him set the tone a little bit. And I said earlier in the show, too, Syracuse is not great with time of possession at all. They're worst in the conference at it. But if you can get the running backs into open space a little bit more, I have a feeling that'll change.
Well, guys, we're going to bring it full circle here, rounding out with the defense, most specifically the secondary for SU. The group got off to a great start in the beginning of the season, but against UNC gave up 400 yards through the air. Steven, how does the back end of this defense step up in the second half of the season?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, of course, because Jeremiah Wilson was missing for that game. Part of it is because, like Dino said, there's not a ton of depth at that position. But like I said in my breakdown before, they're going to be given a huge test this weekend when they go up against Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. Neither of those guys are easy to defend. It's not going to be easy for Jeremiah Wilson. It's not going to be easy for anybody else. So really, you just got to say a prayer and hope for the best, because there's not much else you can do to get in the way of those two guys.
Well, I think there is an out, all right? The safeties need to make plays. I mean, SU obviously doesn't have the corners to match up with Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, but if the safeties stay over the top, I mean, there is a chance that they could force a turnover, and it's very, very important that the safeties do their job, because if they don't, the secondary tanks and the entire defense tanks in turn.
Well, we'll see if this Syracuse team can actually do well in the bowling alley, but you guys, fabulous job. After the break here, we wrap up on Cuse Countdown. We take a look around the ACC and give our picks for this Saturday's matchup. Stay with us. Welcome back to Cuse Countdown, wrapping up shop here with Srikar, Rajendran, Steven Sklar. I'm Chloe Smarz. Guys, we're nearing the halfway point of college football season, and when we look at this SU team in particular, the difference between playing at home versus on the road is a concern if you're an SU fan. Only 2 road tests so far at Purdue and at UNC. SU got off to a slow start, though, in West Lafayette against Purdue, was able to come away with the win, though. And well, we already mentioned it, but the disaster down in Chapel Hill last Saturday. The Orange tend to have better success in the high energy of the Dome, but it's a major red flag, Steven, for the Orange, considering they are 0-6 down in Tallahassee.
Yeah, it's one of the many red flags that you can point to for this Syracuse team. But if you look historically, ever since that 10-win season for the Orange, back in 2018, road games have been a problem, regardless of whether it's a Drake May and UNC or even if it's just a Georgia Tech. They've gone 6-15 on the road since 2018. And like I said, it doesn't matter who the opponent is. They still always find a way to lose. So it's just a matter of, I don't know, getting a better night's sleep, being a little bit more energized when you walk off the bus. But you got to change something up if you want to change this narrative here, because what it is right now is that Syracuse can't hang on the road.
It's not good to be walking into Doak Campbell Stadium in any case, but for a team that struggles on the road, I mean, that's pretty awful. And you mentioned it earlier in the show, but this is an atmosphere unlike no other. Obviously, the Tomahawk Chops are going to be going crazy, but here is the thing. Penalties. You got to think about how the crowd will factor into discipline, right? False starts, penalties of that sort. The crowd can definitely affect that. So for a team that struggles on the road, this is a classic trap for a team like that.
Well, taking a broader look at the conference overall, Week 6 officially in the books. A major storyline in the conference this past week, Louisville now undefeated after beating Sam Hartman and Notre Dame. Seminoles, though, really the only team living up to their preseason hype. Srikar, thoughts on how the ACC is panning out so far?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it with Louisville. Rock solid football so far. It's a big surprise out of the ACC, at least for me. FSU and UNC still up there, 2 teams that SU has already faced. And as they go into that latter half of the schedule, it gets easier. That is the good news for SU, right? They have time to figure this thing out and get to a bowl game, but they got to beat the inferior opponents.
Louisville, Florida State topping the charts right now in the ACC. Like you said, Louisville a little bit of a surprise. Florida State not so much. I think going into this season we knew just how dominant they were going to be. And then also at the top, a team Syracuse just faced and lost to, UNC. So a lot of good teams that Syracuse has faced so far, but it does get easier. Like you mentioned, Wake Forest, Boston College, Virginia Tech. All of these teams at the bottom of the conference still coming up later in the season.
So bringing it back to this Saturday, rounding out the show with some predictions. Steven, keeping it simple, is there any chance that SU comes away with the win?
Absolutely not. There is absolutely no chance that they come away with a win this Saturday. I think that the mismatches are, they're too strong all across the board. Syracuse's offense versus Florida State's defense. Syracuse's defense versus Florida State's offense. It doesn't matter where you look. Syracuse is outmatched. I'm going 49-10, a big blowout.
I also think it's going to be a blowout, but I'm not going to go to that extent. I will go with 45-14. Who knows where that 14 points will come from? It could come in garbage time, but yeah, as you mentioned, FSU's got way too much going in their favor.
It's a sweep from the 3 of us. I also got Florida State 48-7. I think it might get ugly. Hopefully not too ugly like we saw last week, but we will see. Guys, before we go, any key that Syracuse could do to get a win this weekend, or is there really no hope?
Just open up the playbook. Don't hold anything back. Just make sure you're leaving it all out there on the field.
Srikar, anything?
Play a clean football game for once.
Well, that's all the time we have for Cuse Countdown. Be sure to check us out on YouTube and at CitrusTV Sports. For the 3 of us, saying so long and enjoy the game.